Good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Tompkins. I'm the Deputy Chief. I'm here to introduce our Detective Lieutenant Josh Croft, who's going to be doing a slideshow today, and you can see it's about the legal system. Josh has been with our department for a number of years. He's been up in investigations for at least the last 6 years, where now he's running the office up there. He is our court liaison. He takes care of anything that has to do with court paperwork, any problems that we may have with the, any of the paperwork that goes up there if there's charges that need to be changed. He also makes sure our department is on post with any type of changes that go on with the court. There's a new questionnaire that just came into play, where all of our officers have to answer questions in reference to what their past background is, so that the prosecutor and the defense attorney know exactly who our officers are and their type of background. That's a new thing that's been a little bit difficult for us as a department to change. As change is always difficult in any police department, but that's basically what Josh does in a nutshell. And I'll let you take over from here.
I don't have that beautiful baritone voice that the Deputy Chief has, so I'll use the microphone. Good morning. Thanks for having me. Thanks for sitting and listening as you enjoy your wonderful breakfast here at the Senior Center. I'm going to talk about the exciting Massachusetts legal system. I know that everybody's enthralled about hearing about it, but sometimes it's something that you think you know a lot about, of how it works and how it's set up, but you'd be surprised at how much they actually do, especially in our little town of Westborough. We have the second busiest court in Worcester County, which to me is shocking because Westborough District Court only represents the town of Westborough, Northborough, Shrewsbury, Grafton, and Southborough and the state police. So it's only those towns, but the second busiest. In my head, I'd be like, Fitchburg's got to be way busier, but they're not, surprisingly. So I'm just going to do kind of an introduction of myself. The Deputy Chief did a great job introducing me, and then just kind of go over the structure of the court system, traffic ticket processes, criminal complaint processes, and any questions about the legal system or anything else that anybody has, I'm more than happy to address. So, my name is Joshua Croft. I'm a detective lieutenant. I've been with the Westborough Police Department since 2012. Before that, I came from the island of Nantucket, where I worked as a police officer there for 2.5 years. I ended up getting my bachelor's and master's degree in criminal justice from Fitchburg State University. My current responsibilities as a detective lieutenant, as the Deputy Chief said, is I am the court liaison officer. I supervise the investigations division, which includes the detectives and school resource officer, and pretty much anything else needed at the police department. I'm kind of the person there if nobody really knows the answer or how to do it. I may be able to figure it out and muck through it some way, somehow. So, the Massachusetts judicial system, it's one of the oldest judicial systems in the country. The Supreme Judicial Court was founded in 1692, and it was called the Massachusetts Superior Court of Judicate. The state of Pennsylvania, of course, always wants to one-up us and say that we're actually 8 years older than you. With the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania. It's disputed. I think we won. The court sits at John Adams Courthouse in Boston. It has a Chief Justice and then several Associate Justices, Frank Gaziano, Scott Kafker, Delalia, Arges, Wendelant, Sergei Georges Jr., Bessie Dewar, Gabriella Olahajian. And what the Supreme Judicial Court is kind of sets the rules for how we do business, how policies, procedures, laws are interpreted, case law that tell us how we can or what we can and can't do based on the Constitution of the United States and the way that the law changes and the interpretation of the law changes over time as we advance as a society and decide that we need to change the way that we do things. Below the Supreme, yes, ma'am.
The Supreme Court justices for the state level, I'm embarrassed to admit I don't know this. Are they assigned? Are they elected, and for what period of time?
So Supreme Court justices in the state of Massachusetts are assigned, they are assigned by the governor. So you need to be appointed by the governor of Massachusetts at the time, and that is a lifetime appointment, up until that you are 70 years of age. Once you hit 70 years of age, you can retire if you want to. And if you want to retire, you can stay on, I forget the term, but you basically are a part-time Supreme Court justice. You can come in and advise and support and still be considered a justice. You're not a full-time person. You come in when you want, or when you're needed, or when you have a area of expertise where you can contribute to the decision.
And
How many part-time justices are there?
Currently, there are none.
Good.
Historically, they've come in from time to time, but as of right now, there are no part-times.
And how does Chief Justice become a Chief Justice?
Most senior member, the longest,
Oh, that's it?
the longest, yeah. Person who's been around the longest, so presumably would have the most experience.
Thank you.
Sure. Underneath the SJC is the appeals court. They're also located in the same building, the John Adams Courthouse. They hear most of the appeals from the 7 court departments of the Massachusetts Trial Court. And they also hear appeals from decisions of certain administrative agencies such as industrial accidents, appellate tax board, and the employer relations board. So basically, if you have a grievance or an issue at work with your employer, the appeals court would be the place where you would bring your complaint, and then they would kind of figure it out. They have 25 total justices with 1 chief justice and 24 associated justices. They hear cases with 3 justices that rotate. So if you bring a case before them, you'll be kind of presenting it to 3 people, and then the next case it'll be 3 different people, and they always rotate, so they always end up sitting with different justices as the year goes on. So it's kind of an interesting system where you get, depending on the justices you get, could dictate how they rule based on, if they're a constitutionalist or if they're someone who kind of is progressive. Then under the appeals court, we have the 7 trial courts. So the 7 trial courts include the Superior Court, District Court, Land Court, Housing Court, Probate and Family Court, and Boston Municipal Court. Underneath those 7 trial courts, for instance, the district courts and the Superior Court, well, each county has their own court within their county, a trial court. So Barnstable, Berkshire, Bristol, Dukes, Essex, Franklin, Hampden, Hampshire, Middlesex, Nantucket, Norfolk, Plymouth, Suffolk, and Worcester all have their own trial courts. They all function underneath the larger trial court system of the appeals court and the SJC. And within each county, there are so like, for instance, in Worcester County, we have Westborough District Court, Milford District Court, Fitchburg District Court, all of these undercourts that kind of serve small little pods of areas, and they deal primarily with minor issues within those communities. So like Westborough District Court is not hearing murders or significant cases that would have been brought to Superior Court. Land Court is exactly what it sounds like. It's a very long and lethargic process that feels like it doesn't really get a lot done. Housing Court is for housing issues, and Probate and Family Court are for probate and family issues. The district courts, the undercourts only really deal with the district side. All of the Land Court, Housing Court, Probate Court, and Superior Court are all in Worcester at the big courthouse. And then that's kind of a map kind of showing the different counties and where each of the courthouses are. So like you have Berkshire, Franklin, Hampshire, Hampden, Worcester, Suffolk, Essex, that one is Norfolk, and then I used to work out here on this little island that was a very interesting place because it's the only place in the United States that's its own town, county, and island. It's very strange because the only reason why Martha's Vineyard isn't because there's actually 3 towns on the vineyard, whereas Nantucket is just 1 town. So, what does Superior Court do? They hear the big cases. So we're talking murders, significant drug trafficking cases, anytime you hear the word indicted, the person was indicted on charges, it means that they're being brought before Superior Court. Superior Court is going to have the best DAs from the DA's office, most experienced. They'll have specialties in white-collar crime, murder cases, sexual assault cases, and the cases that we really need to pay attention to make sure that we do justice on this and we do it well. It also has jurisdiction on civil cases, civil actions in excess of $50,000. It has jurisdiction, first-degree murder automatically, no matter what. If you're charging somebody with first-degree murder, it goes to Superior Court. Our Superior Court is Worcester. Also, you can have grand jury, which, grand jury is kind of an interesting thing. It's, picture this room with every chair filled of just normal people, and they just listen to police officers come in and tell them about their cases and say whether they can or cannot have information. So my example is I asked to go to grand jury about a case. It's a case where somebody had money stolen from them, and I want information from the bank account the money went into. So I go in there, I kind of say my thing, and I'm like, hold on, can you just be brief? This is from the ADA. Can you just be brief, because the next person coming in is going to be indicted on murder. So huge pressure, oh, my case doesn't really mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of what everybody's doing today. So okay, yeah. So ultimately they ended up giving me my information, and I got to leave, and then the next case was actually, really important that they needed to pay attention to.
Yeah, the other thing with grand jury is there's no defense there. It's just the prosecution being able to present a case. So there's nobody that can, ask questions in reference to whether the defendant should have certain rights or if the evidence should be thrown out. It's the best presentation, it's the best chance to present a case without having it be questioned. So a lot of times when you hear about people going to grand jury to try to get an indictment on an individual, if they cannot get an indictment on that individual, then you know that the case really probably has a lot of holes in it, because it's just you're presenting the facts of the case, the evidence, and there's no questioning it. The questions come from the jury themselves sitting there that understand it a little bit better. But there's nobody sitting there going, that didn't happen, or there's another reason for that happening. So it's we've done a lot of cases up there, and typically, if you're in front of grand jury, you're going to get what you're looking for. Typically, I haven't seen many times when you go to grand jury and you don't get what you're asking for. And if you don't, then you know that your case really needs a lot of work.
So I'll talk about Westborough District Court, which I'm very familiar with. I go there every day. It's kind of my primary, between my office and the clerk's office at the Westborough District Court, is more likely than not where they find me. It's located at 186 Oak Street, right on the corner of Oak and Milk. It looks like a typical courthouse from the 60s and 70s where they built a bunch of them. Haven't been updated much since. So if you go in there, it's going to, the wood panel walls, and very, very nice. Currently, the presiding judge is Judge Jennifer Stark. She came to us from Framingham District Court. She is a strong advocate for domestic violence laws and preparedness in trial. If you're not ready in trial, she will not be very happy with you, especially when you've had time to prepare, because you do. That building contains the district attorney's office, clerk's office, probation department, and the court lockup. Here's a wide range of cases, civil, criminal, and traffic citation appeals. Last year, we had almost 5,000 criminal filings, which is a lot. I think almost 2,900 of them were show cause hearings. The remainder were for arrests. They hear civil cases. They hear about 300 to 400 civil cases a year. Those are typically done on Wednesdays. And then they do traffic citation appeals for show cause hearings as well as judges' hearings. Our court serves Westborough, Southborough, Northborough, Grafton, Shrewsbury, and the state police. The jurisdiction the state police serve is pretty much the highways that go through our area. So the Mass Pike, 290, and a little bit of 495. So if we arrest somebody, what's the process look like? we will take that person into custody if we have probable cause to believe that they've committed an offense that we can arrest somebody on. Not all offenses that people commit are arrestable. But if we do have an incident where it is arrestable, they will be booked. We will collect personal identifying information, take photos and fingerprints of them, and then if it's within court hours, we will bring them right up to the court. If it's outside of court hours, basically any time after 2 p.m. or on the weekends, we have to hold them and establish bail. The way that we establish bail is we call the bail clerk. We notify them of the charges and any criminal history that the person has, and then they will set a monetary amount for their promise to return to court to answer to the charges. They set this amount, keeping in mind several factors. One factor is the seriousness of the crime. If it's a very serious crime where they shouldn't be released, the bail is going to be high. If they're a person who has not come to court in the past, where they have a lot of what we call default warrants on their history, where they haven't shown up when they're supposed to, the number will be higher. If it's their third or fourth time doing this and they haven't really figured it out or learned their lesson, it's going to be higher. Bail fees can be anywhere from $40, which is the administrative cost for the bail commissioner to come out. That means that it's probably a pretty minor offense, and there's a good chance that you'll be at court on Monday or Tuesday or whatever day the next court is in session. If it is a serious offense, it can be anywhere from $540, so that's a $500 bail fee plus a $40 fee, all the way up to $10,000. It just depends on the circumstances. We've had the whole range of it with cases that we've investigated. Everybody's eligible for bail, unless they're not. Reasons that they wouldn't be eligible for bail: if it's a straight warrant, that means that a judge issued a warrant for their arrest because they didn't show up for something or they didn't abide by some rule at court that they were supposed to follow. Restraining order violations, they are held until the next court sitting. We do not release restraining order violations because you violated a court order that was issued by a judge. So restraining orders are orders between two people who've been in a relationship before and have had a risk of harm. And then there's where the offender is danger to the public if they're released, or a flight risk. What will happen is the officer will complete what we call a criminal complaint and a statement of facts. A statement of facts is just a summary of what happened to fulfill the elements of the crimes that we are bringing forward. We are functioning when we do this on probable cause. Probable cause, to keep simply, is 51% or more chance that the person did it and what they did was. It's a very low bar. Once you get into court, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. That means that there is no doubt that this person 100%. When we bring somebody, when we're eligible to arrest somebody, it is just 51%. So that criminal complaint, statement of facts, and the full police report get delivered to the court, and the defendant to be arraigned on the charges that we allege that he has committed. They will be released or held, depending on the circumstances, at their arraignment, where you get the famous line where they'll plead guilty or not guilty. I don't think I've ever had anybody say, "I'm guilty, thank you." I've always said not guilty. After that is what seems like forever and a day of scheduling of events. These events begin with the pretrial conference, where the district attorney's office and the defense attorney will get together and discuss on, are we going to still move forward? Here's the stuff that we know, here's the stuff that you know, and try to see if we can kind of resolve this case without having it go to trial. After that's first compliant election date. That's the date where they decide this is the date that we're going to have either our criminal motion to suppress, or we're going to have our bench, jury, or jury trial. The bench, jury, or jury trial is the defendant's choice on what they want to do. You can be judged by a jury, or you can be judged by a judge. And there's a lot of factors that go into why you would choose one or the other. And usually it's at the advice of their defense counsel of which one they should choose. If their argument, so like if they somebody did something awful, like morally repugnant, they probably wouldn't want to do a jury trial, because the people in the jury trial are going to have a hard time separating the act from the legal rules. It's going to be hard to kind of say, well, yeah, they didn't do something right, but that's still awful. He should be held accountable. That be a person that would choose a bench trial because a judge is just looking at the matter of law. Did they do it? And did the evidence that leads us to believe that he did it, was it legally obtained? Any questions on that?
What's the percentage of people that don't show up after they're on bail?
Quite low, because there's that legal ramification. So if they do the $40 bail fee, they don't really lose anything. If they do the $540 and they don't show up, they lose the money, the $500, or whoever posted the money for them loses the money. So there's a financial incentive to show up, and that counts for the whole process, throughout the whole process. So if you don't show up to any part and you have a $10,000 bail, the court keeps you $10,000 because you didn't show up. You didn't agree, you did not adhere to the terms of the bail. So it's a big financial incentive.
So is it the responsibility of the Westborough Police Department to go and find that person and bring them to court?
No. So we will be, like, if they're a resident of Westborough, we will get notified that a warrant was issued for their arrest because they didn't show up to court. We'll have an idea that they were supposed to show up and they didn't, and we'll be able to find them. The obligation is that if we come across them, through the normal course of work, if it's somebody that we really want to hold accountable and bring forth to the court, we will absolutely go and find them and get them and present them at court. It just depends on the circumstances.
So it's the Westborough Police Department that has to do this?
Or any police department. Any police department that interacts with that person, whether a legal kind of conversation or interaction, the warrant would be in the system, and they would arrest them on the warrant, and then they would be brought before the court.
It varies too. I mean, like, in Westborough Police Department is doing an investigation, and they, at the conclusion of the investigation, they place someone under arrest or they charge someone. Obviously, we have vested interest in that individual going to court. So if that person does not show up and they become, they're out there, there's a warrant for the arrest, we may go after that person depending on where they are. Warrants within our community could be for various things. So it could be for motor vehicle infractions. It could be for something more serious. It just depends. If it's on the minor end, we may make a phone call and say, hey, Mr. Tompkins, you did not show up for court today, you had civil infractions, there is a warrant out for your arrest, you might want to go to the courthouse tomorrow and clear that up. Because once there's a warrant in the system, and then you have an interaction with law enforcement, there's a strong likelihood that you'll be placed under arrest and then booked and go through the whole process again. And a lot of times, it's miscommunication. There could be an address change where someone wasn't notified that they were supposed to show up at court, and then there's a warrant in the system form for something that's minor. So we take all that into account. If it's something significant, it could be even from a different agency, and they may reach out to us and say, hey, Mr. Tompkins has a warrant for something very, very serious, we would like you to go pick him up. And then we would, proceed as we need to. But, the warrant system it varies. We don't have a whole lot of warrants in this community, but in the city of Boston, there could be a lot more. So a lot of times they will kind of feel it out. If they come across someone with a warrant, depending on how serious it is, they may say, why don't you go up to the courthouse and take care of that instead of taking them in custody.
You had a question, Don?
When they post bail, isn't there a situation where you post a percentage of the bail, if you use the bail bondsman, like 10%? Or something like that, I've heard that.
So that's in other states. Massachusetts doesn't have a bail bond system. It's just not allowed. So that would be where you would pay the bail bondsman a percentage of your bail. So it's usually like 10%. So like they'll say, well, we're going to hold him on a $10,000 bail, but he really only has to raise $1,000. So he would pay the bail bondsman $1,000. Bail bondsman would say, I promise, here's $10,000 that I'll put up for him. Of course, if he defaults, then you get shows like Dog the Bounty Hunter and stuff like that. But that doesn't happen in Massachusetts.
Okay.
Other states.
So if the person can't afford the bail, you said they're held,
Mm-hmm.
where are they held?
Worcester House of Correction in West Boylston. And, that's with the kind of changes of laws, people are held on bail. However, it can't be a financial reason where we're only setting a large bail amount because, it's a serious crime. But if they're unemployed and they couldn't afford the bail anyway, that amount has to be revisited by the judge so that they're not being, detained just because they can't afford it.
So we don't have a jail in Westborough?
We have the holding facility at the police station. So a lot of times, if somebody gets arrested on a Friday or a Saturday and they're not eligible for bail, we will try to get them bailed the best that we can. If we can't, or if it's an incident where they're not eligible for bail, we will then house them at the Worcester House Correction. They have a safe keep where they will hold prisoners for the weekend for us, which is much better for the prisoner because their facility is designed to hold people, whereas ours is just designed for longer periods of time. Ours is just for short stays. It's very, I don't want to say barbaric, but you're in a box for 3 days where you're sleeping in the same room that you have a toilet and you're eating in. And it's just a concrete box. If you've ever been on a tour of the police station, it's pretty much the same everywhere. It's not somewhere where you would want to spend a long time. Concrete bed, wool blanket. It's not exactly the Hilton. So we try to, especially for staffing issues, because if there's somebody in the station, we have to have somebody watching them. And that's one less police officer out on the road, serving the community and protecting the community. So we want to move them along to a facility that is better suited to kind of house them for the temporary housing.
The liability side of things is astronomical. So, we've gotten to the point, I know with Josh and I, at the beginning of our career, we would keep people for, a long time, 2 days, 3 days, what we consider a long time. But we've gotten very good at working with the House of Correction. And also, is it Holyoke? Chicopee. Where we would bring women prisoners. So we bring the male prisoners to Worcester and the female prisoners to that location. But we will do that on, at a point now, if we make an arrest in the evening, we will try to make those arrangements. Again, just because, we can do it and we have done it, but liability-wise, it's much better to put them to a facility that they can be watched and given, certain rights that we cannot, give them here at the Westborough PD.
Here's just one more question. The public defenders fall under which category?
So in Westborough, we have somebody who's assigned to the Public Defender's Office, the Bar Association, and that it rotates. So it's anybody who practices as a defense attorney in the Westborough Police or in the Westborough District Court, they have to have a week rotation where they represent people who can't afford an attorney through the process, and they'll be their attorney throughout the entire process, unless somehow they find a way that they can afford their own attorney. But it's rotating for the Public Defender's Office, and it's kind of a philanthropy to say, well, you guys get to practice, on paying clients. You got to do your part, and to keep the criminal justice system rolling, of taking on these clients for minimum payment amounts. Any other questions? Yeah.
We say if some evidence has to be properly obtained, if somebody has evidence that wasn't properly obtained, but that it showed up, there's no question or doubt that he was guilty of a crime or something. Is that, that would be about big then.
So in your example, would it be like, say, you got a piece of evidence. I didn't ask you to get it as a police officer. So you obtained evidence somehow that I wouldn't have been able to legally obtain without a search warrant. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
So as long as the police don't ask you to do it, it's okay. But because I'm a representative of the government, that would be infringing on whoever you got the evidence from, right? They would have standing to say, no, you don't have a right to get that. But since you got it and I didn't ask for it, so like some of the examples are, say your kid has, you know, they bought something that you don't want and it's illegal. And you don't want them to have, so you call us and say, here's this BB gun. I don't want my kid to have this BB gun. He's under 18, he's not supposed to possess it. Great. I couldn't go into your house and take that BB gun, but you can give it to me. I think is the best example. You know, in obtaining evidence, we rely a lot on, you know, the rules and exceptions that we have. One of the things that we've been leveraging very well and very efficiently is writing of search warrants that give us the authority to go into places, private places, to seize evidence related to a crime that we know. These search warrants are presented in front of the clerk magistrate. He decides whether there is probable cause to search that area for that particular evidence or not. And it gives us the authority to go in there, whereas we used to just be like, well, we would need a search warrant. We don't really know how to write it, or we're not very good at writing it, so we'll just forget about it and go with what we have. So we're getting better. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, I'm thinking one, if, say you pull someone over and they go down the car, started running, you know, and they went into a place, and you followed them in there, there was a private house, and they had drugs in there.
Yeah.
But you don't have a search warrant for those drugs. Now you have the evidence.
Okay. Interesting example. What are you running for? That's an important question that we need to ask, or we need to know. Do we know about you? Do we know that you, like, do you have warrants? Are you wanted? Do we have probable cause to arrest you anyway? Or are you just taking off for, you know, I'm going for a jog. I don't like the police. Like, these are the questions that we have to answer. Now, if we know you have a warrant, we have probable cause to arrest you, and you're trying to evade that arrest, and you run into somebody's house, or you run into your house, we have exigent circumstances to go get you. Because we know that you're in there, we have the probable cause to arrest you, we can go into the house and get you, but it has to be fresh and continued pursuit. It can't be like you ran from the traffic stop, we couldn't find you for 3 hours, and then somebody sees that, or we get information that, hey, we think that you're in that house, and then nobody answers the door. We can't just go into the house and go get you, because it's not fresh and continued pursuit anymore. We have to develop probable cause that you're in that house, and then we can get a search warrant to go get you. And then so like, say we go into the house with fresh and continued pursuit, we're chasing you, we put you in custody, and there is a meth lab that we're standing in. Oh no, this is terrible. First thing we do is get everybody out of there, because now that we see it, it's in plain view. Okay, great. We need to get a search warrant so that we can make sure that we can collect everything, not just what we can see. Because we can only deal with what we can see, and it's always good practice to wait, pause, get the search warrant, do it right, instead of just saying, yep, we're just going to take all this and see you later.
It's a good one.
Yeah. So after you're arraigned and you go through the pre-trial and stuff, so if we summon somebody, so the difference between a summons and arrest, not really a whole lot different, other than we don't take you into custody and bring you to jail immediately. We will summon you, which just means that we have probable cause for probably not a serious offense that you committed a crime. And we don't have the right of arrest to, or we do have the right of arrest to, but we're using our discretion in not arresting you on it, for a myriad of reasons. What happens then is same process, criminal complaint, statement of facts, and copies of the report go to the court. They will then send out letters for what's called a show cause hearing. All that is a hearing between the police department, the clerk magistrate, and the defendant to make sure that there's probable cause for the charges to become an arraignment. This is a very efficient system at kind of weeding out cases that don't really need to be at the court's attention. Circumstances where you have an issue with your driver's license or your registration of your car, that's a crime, but you're able to fix before we get to the show cause hearing, we can then say, oh, Mr. Tompkins fixed his suspended driver's license. He got his license back, everything's good, great. Thank you, Mr. Tompkins, for doing the right thing. We're gonna dismiss your case, and it doesn't go on your criminal record. If Mr. Tompkins does not fix his driver's license, it's still suspended, he hasn't done anything to fix it, then what happens is we have the show cause hearing. The clerk magistrate probably will find probable cause for the charges to go forward, and then he will be arraigned, and then it will be on his permanent record that he was arraigned on operating after a suspended license charge. It may well get dismissed at the payment of court costs, but it's going to show up on his record. So every time, have you ever been charged with a crime, he has to answer, yes, I was driving with a suspended license, even though he probably could have fixed it and avoided it altogether.
Is this like complaints between neighbors? Okay, the fence isn't on the border, or
That would be more
or
of,
his motorcycle is too loud, or
so the law says that you can. You can bring a complaint against anybody in your, that you have probable cause. The law says that it's possible. The court won't accept it. And the reason for that is procedure. And it helps to kind of weed out some of the stuff that doesn't need to be brought to the court's attention. So they decide, you know what, everything that we're going to hear is going to come from a police department. They know, we can tell them and have a policy and procedure in place on how things are going to go, so the paperwork's done properly and thoroughly, and also make sure it's well documented. So while yes, you can bring complaints against your neighbor, you can get harassment prevention orders against your neighbor, but you legally can file criminal complaints against people. However, I haven't really heard of a court ever accepting them. Have you?
No, but it probably more so if there was a criminal offense that happened with your neighbor. So like, we do go to disputes for neighbors, and you know, if we can't do anything at that scene and take care of the situation, if there's a criminal issue, we would put that on for a show cause, because then they would, you know, both parties would be able to just go present the case to the clerk magistrate instead of going in front of a judge. But a lot of times those type of cases will go in front of a judge because there is two sides of the story that need to be presented. Most of the show cause hearings that we deal with are for, you know, larcenies under 1,200, you know, shoplifting, obviously the motor vehicle infractions. Most of that stuff will go in front of the clerk magistrate, and it cuts down a lot of the, you know, the log jam in front of the judge. So, and Josh is the, you know, has the fun act of going up and doing the show cause hearings, which can be anytime, you know, 20 cases at once, so just a few, and he'll present our side of the charge. So
It's usually pretty efficient. When it gets really bogged down is when you have an interpreter services needed for the defendant. So then you have to speak very slowly and deliberately. Sometimes the interpreter is on site, sitting next to the defendant. So that speeds up the process a lot. But if they're over Zoom, then it's very slow and difficult. Really complicates the process.
And it's good. The way we have it set up is we have, Josh does all the show cause hearings for the criminal matters, and then we have one of our patrol lieutenants that will do all the civil motor vehicle citation. And it's, you know, for us it works out well because, you know, the criminal cases can be complicated, and it could be a lot of different things that need to be perfect for the case to go forward, and that's Josh's expertise. Whereas motor vehicle infractions, so the speeding tickets, any type of civil infraction, that gives our patrol lieutenant an idea of what we're dealing with out on the street, what our officers are doing, and make sure that we're identifying, you know, if there's problems that we need to address, or, you know, if there's something more that we need to do with our patrol officers. The patrol lieutenant will be able to sit there and go, hey chief, I think we need to have more officers out on Route 9 because there seems to be you know, an abundance of motor vehicle infractions. So the way that we handle the system, I think, is very, very good.
So if any of you leadfoots out here get a traffic citation, which, you know, can happen, the process is pretty simple. You either you mail the ticket in, or you submit it online that you want to pay it. That means that you admit that, yep, I was speeding and I deserve my ticket, or you can appeal it. The appeal process it's a $25 fee to go in front of the clerk magistrate with the patrol lieutenant testifying on behalf of the Westborough Police Department to saying that you committed some civil infraction. The clerk magistrate will then decide whether you're responsible for the citation or not responsible. They take into a lot of factors of what the infraction is. Do you have a history of driving like a maniac? You know, are you admitting to certain facts that you're very sorry that you were driving, or are you like, nope, he just pulled me over because my car was purple. That can kind of go one way or the other. If the clerk finds you responsible and you still don't like the decision, by the way, the $25 fee is refundable if you win. So if you're found not responsible, you get your $25 back for appealing, which is kind of nice. Used to not always be that way. But if you don't like the clerk magistrate's decision, you can appeal it to a judge. That'll cost you $50. That one's non-refundable. That's where you would go into open court and plead your case and ask questions of the actual officer who pulled you over and issued you the citation. Questions about why they stopped you and why they gave you a ticket. Any questions on traffic citations?
What about if you can't afford that $25 or you can't afford the $50?
I imagine that there's some form of a waiver that you can apply for in appealing your ticket, because the court system has gotten a lot better at not punishing people because they can't afford it, or holding people accountable just because they can't afford to appeal the process.
How many interpreters do you have available? How many different languages?
Not enough. Not enough. Portuguese, Spanish are the two main ones. Haitian Creole has become in necessary supply lately. Mandarin is from time to time. Pretty much you basic ones, but there's not enough interpreters. Like if anybody out here wants a part-time job and they can speak another language and they can get certified that they can speak that language, the court is looking for as many interpreters as we can get. But most of the time we can get through it. The interpreter will be available, may not be available right when you need it, but we need more. And there's always more languages.
And who pays for the interpreter?
The court does, as part of the operating budget. Because the court has an obligation for due process. Everybody has a right to a fair and speedy trial, which means that they need to understand what's going on at the same time.
So if you don't have an interpreter,
We
they let go, or?
We have to find one.
The cases get moved quite a bit because they will go into court, they'll have a date, and they'll go in there and there won't be an interpreter. And then they will sit there and say, either they have actually considered the case right then and there based on its merit and say, we're just going to court cost or whatever, or they will move it to another date. So it can be challenging. I was up at court a couple weeks ago and I think they bounced 3 cases based on the fact that they couldn't get an interpreter. So we use a different system for our officers when they're out on the scene that we pay out of the police budget, but all the interpreters at the court are paid by the state.
I know, because I work with a hospital and you've got like 40 different interpreters.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
Set up in front of the iPad.
And when you're questioning someone or when you're trying to take care of someone and you can't communicate with them, it's challenging, it's frustrating, especially when you're trying to help and you can't because you don't necessarily know exactly what's going on.
I also have trust issues because the person that I'm talking to said 77 words to the interpreter, and the interpreter looked at me and said, they said no. What? They said like 77 words. What happened? Anybody else? Question? Yes?
Back to the traffic, about warnings. What's the impact of a warning?
There is no impact of warnings. If you get a warning, it used to not even go on your driver history. Now they at least said they put it on your driver history report, so we could see that, because we used to not be able, unless you were stopped in the town of Westborough, we wouldn't know if you got a warning in the town of Shrewsbury or Northborough or Grafton. Now they started adding those warnings to your driver history. It doesn't have any effect on your driver's license or your insurance rating or anything like that. It's just logged that says that you got a warning in the town of Shrewsbury, so that when I stop you in the town of Westborough for speeding as well, I go, maybe he can't read the signs. Or maybe he just has a light foot. Anybody else? So, I'm the court liaison for the Westborough Police Department. I do a lot of paperwork, constant paperwork. The deputy chief said earlier about the new Rule 14 changes. And what that basically does is it changed the way that we provide information to the district attorney's office, who then forwards the information to the defense team. If anybody's watched My Cousin Vinny, it's called disclosure. We have to disclose everything that we have to the defense. What they've now done is we used to just have to disclose, the report, the camera footage, any evidence that we had. Now we have to figure out a way to disclose even more information. So that could be, things that you believe of the witness, things that like if you think the witness has a mental health issue, whether they were intoxicated or they were impaired at the time, like these are all the things, because they've changed it from exculpatory evidence to any evidence favorable to the defense, which now puts the burden on the police department and the ADAs to provide a defense for the defense. So we're working through that, but the rules came from the Supreme Judicial Court, so they are the rule of the law. We have to figure out how to play within those rules and to fulfill our obligations so we don't get in the way of due process of law. Because we're not only interested in prosecuting offenders, we're also interested in holding up the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of Massachusetts, which means protecting the defendant's rights as well. A lot of people think that we're just interested in prosecuting cases. Nope. We are interested in truth and justice. Justice means for both, not just for victims. I make sure I do all the paperwork. I make sure people show up to court when they need to show up, and fulfill that evidence discovery. And also keep up the department with case law that changes the way that we do things to make sure that our policies and procedures are reflective of what we should be doing and what the SJC says we should be doing based on best practices and case law. And that's actually all my time, amazingly enough. Yes,
I have an interesting question, which I think is probably the most important thing you do or don't do. When the police issue a arrest or make an arrest, it has to be prosecuted by the district attorney. And what if the district attorney says to you, you don't get a case to stand on, or you're gonna lose, or it isn't worth my time, or he's gonna be found innocent? Do you advocate for prosecution, or do you just sit back and say, it's your decision to make because you're the one that's gonna be presenting the case for the prosecution in court?
So as long as there's probable cause for the charges to go forward, we can advocate for the case to continue to go forward. We'll have the conversation with the DA's office, say, well, why don't you want this to go forward? Like, is there specific reasons? Do you think this case has holes in it that we're not seeing? Because they're the one, all we are is we present the facts of the case. Their job is to prosecute it. We do the best that we can to present the case. But if they're looking at it from the perspective, well, is this a winner or not?
Yeah.
Can I get this beyond a reasonable doubt? And if there's more holes that need filling, then they're good about having that conversation with us and saying, we need answers for A, B, and C. And then we're not going to dismiss it yet, but this case is a wounded duck. And we need to work on it to build a better case.
And that goes back to what we were talking about with probable cause. The probable cause is a low bar for us to get to. And that's why discretion is such a big thing for police officers. They have to take a lot of things into consideration, and they got to take it into consideration quickly. Things happen very fast on the road, and they have to make decisions. But ultimately, when it gets up to the court level, they're going to look at the case and sit there and go, you had probable cause, but it's not really a strong case, and I don't think we're going to pursue this case any longer. We may make arrangements. We may lower the charges, or and that was something else. As far as something that goes to the Supreme Court or Superior Court, they may change the charge and bring it back down to the district court, which would be a lighter or lesser sentence. So there's a lot of things that happen within the courts, and if there is something that they don't want to prosecute, but we really, strongly or passionate about, that's where the chief comes into play, and that's where, some pressure will be applied with, hey, there is a history with this individual that's not, being taken into account. But we have victims that, are not being properly represented here, and we really need to go forward with this case. So they're receptive. They understand that there are pressures within the community, within the police department, where we need them to apply the pressure and go forward with the case. And yet at the same time, we understand the court system and how many cases are there and what the charges might be and what the case might be, and we will take a step back too. But once there's a victim involved, if there's a victim involved, it's a whole different area that we have to play in, because it's not just the individual that we're prosecuting. We have a victim we have to be worried about. So that also will sometimes change the direction of the case.
Any other questions? Anything whatsoever? I know that we're up against the next event.
How many officers are tied up every day at the court, rather than being out in the community?
Most of the time it's just me. Most of the time. If they have a criminal case where they're testifying, usually we will make it so that there's an officer replacing them on the road if they're going to be there the whole day. So like if it's a case at Worcester District and it's on for trial, they can expect to be there all day.
So you can represent the arresting officer in the court, such that that officer can be out in the community?
Not for a testimonial. So like if it's on for trial, it has to be the officer. If it's a show cause hearing or if it's a ticket appeal, it can be a representative of the police department. But for the actual like motion and bench trial or jury trial, it has to be the officer. So we will fill an overtime shift or make sure that we have adequate coverage that day.
So that officer, he or she, has to be taken off civic duty and sit in the court, and sit for the whole day until the case is called?
If the case is called, they don't always.
Well, 1 or 2 a week, one to 2 officers a week will be actually at a hearing, actually at a trial or whatever. But as Josh, that's how the whole system works, is that we're able to minimize the officers being able to testify by having, Josh do the show cause hearings, by having the patrol lieutenant do the civil hearings. So it's like, it lowers that. But once it goes forward in front of a judge, that officer has to be there.
And if it's a case where you have 7 officers on the shift and it's a serious call and you have 5 that were at the scene, you could have 5 officers tied up at the court all day.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that have changed, and they will continue to change. But body-worn cameras, they help a lot, because a lot of times, if there's a big case, as he's saying, with 5 officers need to be there, they can look at body cameras and say, oh, well, we might be able to limit that down to 1 person because we've seen what the other footage shows. So it just depends. But the court works with the police departments because they also know that by tying up officers, they're taking resources off the street, and it costs a lot of money to do trials. So they take all that into consideration as well.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening to me, and I hope you learned something. And have a great rest of your day.